Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are talking about the macro environment as well as a couple pieces of Tesla news. We have some exciting news on Model Y to get to, but I do want to start out with the macro environment again. Tesla stock on the day, another rough day, finishing down 11.6% to $560.55. That compared to the Nasdaq down 9.4% on the day. And furthermore, in after hours, Tesla today is down another 7.4% to $519. Really rough. Things continue to get worse for the macro environment. I think, unfortunately, things are only going to continue on that path over the next couple of weeks. We talked about a lot of this yesterday, but in terms of macro environment news today, we have Disney closing their parks. We have Universal Orlando closing their parks. The NCAA has canceled March Madness, all spring tournaments for men's and women's sports. So yesterday we had talked about the fact that they were excluding fans. No surprise to see that happen today. Obviously, those events bring a lot of travel on. The NHL has postponed their season. The MLB has postponed the start of their season at least 30 days. We're now seeing Norway and Denmark institute lockdowns similar to what we have seen in Italy. I think it's only a matter of time before the situation in the US evolves to be at that level. And I think we're only going to continue to see more and more action over the next few days. I mean, even just looking at schools in Seattle, yesterday we talked about how all public schools were closed 2 weeks. Now today, 1 day later, they're now all closed 6 weeks. So again, we continue to see this progressing. And based on what we have seen in other countries that are further along this virus development curve, it's only going to get worse and worse. I mean, in Italy, there have been nearly 400 deaths just in the last 2 days from virus that have been confirmed. So if we assume that that's going to be the situation in the US in a couple of weeks, and you could argue that the health characteristics or the demographics are different in the individual countries, but regardless, the virus is progressing. And if the US is in a similar situation in a couple of weeks, like the data is projecting right now, the US has about 5.5 times the population of Italy. So you could be looking at 1,000 deaths per day in a situation like that. And we may still see increases in Italy. We don't know. So things continue to worsen there. Today, the Federal Reserve announced $1.5 trillion in short-term liquidity, essentially, short-term loans to ease liquidity concerns for banks. So that's, some sort of stimulus that is starting to happen. The market popped a little bit on that news, but quickly fell down to the levels that it was at before that. Didn't seem to do a whole lot. There's a lot going on in Congress right now, trying to get some sort of, further package or plan implemented, and it's being locked up a little bit in partisanship right now. So we'll just have to see how that progresses. It sounds like tomorrow may be the day for some more movement on that. But in terms of Tesla specific news, we have reports from Automobile Voca in Germany. They were reporting that Tesla has pulled around 30 Americans out of Gigafactory Berlin based on those new EU travel restrictions implemented by the US yesterday. So Tesla's trying to get those American workers back as soon as possible. I'm not sure if that's already happened or if it's just in the works right now. I'm not sure how difficult flights are to get, but we are seeing, signs of this impacting Tesla now on the individual micro level. And it's obviously not a great time for these lockdowns to be occurring with the end of quarter delivery push happening here over the next few weeks in, Europe and in the US, just based on the batching and things like that. So there is a lot of potential for this to impact Tesla on a micro level. And in general, my thoughts are that these are all going to be relatively short and medium term concerns. My outlook for the longer term definitely has not changed. But I have reduced my exposure not really that significantly, but I'm off margin. I don't have any call options right now. I'm just long stock 100%. I mean, I have some cash too, but in terms of the breakdown of my positions, it's only stock right now. So I know some people get concerned when Tesla goes down. It's fair, but no one needs to worry about that. I mean, I'm positioned myself for wherever this goes. Hopefully other people are as well, because I just, never financial advice, but my own personal assessment is this is gonna get a lot worse before it gets better. So I think, hedging risk where possible is prudent right now until we see the signs of this starting to peak, and we see, instead of further restrictions being placed on, which I think is almost certain to occur over the next few days and few weeks. Until we start seeing some of those things being curtailed, I think the markets are going to be pressured. Maybe the one caveat to that would be if there's some, material progress made on some sort of vaccination, things like that, that could change the sentiment around sort of the whole macro environment right now. That could definitely happen. But right now, I think the risk is outweighing the reward in the short term. So I've deleveraged as much as possible. I might still do a little bit of selling here over the next few days just to have some cash in reserve. But that's just kind of my point of view right now. I think there are some potential impacts for Tesla in terms of production that could be looming. We heard today that Fiat had a case reported in one of their factories. It doesn't sound like they're planning on shutting down production. It sounds like they're just going to increase sanitization efforts and things like that in the factory. When we think about Tesla, we know they've got experience dealing with preventative measures with Gigafactory Shanghai. So I think they're well positioned to react and adjust accordingly. But I don't think that we should use that as just a catch-all excuse for, okay, Tesla's production out of Fremont is going to be 100%, consistent, or, in Nevada either, because just because the situation played out that way in Shanghai and production is currently up and running, we did still have downtime. There was, the extension of Chinese New Year that caused loss of production there for a week or two. And we also don't know what production would be at right now if the situation had not developed. So yes, while there is production from Gigafactory Shanghai, they were starting at a really low base, whereas Fremont is not necessarily directly comparable to that because Tesla's already got a really high base there that any sort of interruption could cause declines versus Gigafactory Shanghai when they're on that production ramp up. Any sort of, disruption during that period of time isn't going to be as visible because we don't really know what the ramp would have looked like otherwise. Versus Fremont, we've got that clear benchmark of what production should be. So I don't think those are necessarily applicable situations to compare to. Again, Tesla should be well positioned to handle it, but handling it doesn't necessarily mean zero disruption. So just wanted to kind of put some thoughts out there on that idea. The other exciting topic, so I guess moving on from sort of the macro environment situation right now, we do have some encouraging news. I know it's tough to find these days, but Model Y deliveries have been scheduled for tomorrow. Multiple different reservation holders are reporting deliveries scheduled for Friday, March 13th or Saturday, March 14th. So it looks like Tesla's going to be able to go from unveiling of the vehicle, the Model Y, last year on March 14th, to deliveries this year on March 13th. So under 1 year to go from unveil to deliveries, which is a really exciting milestone and should bring, I don't know, necessarily a good sentiment to Tesla tomorrow, but at least some good news around the company and should lead to some exciting reviews and things like that. We'll start learning a lot more about the vehicle, the efficiency, and eventually here over the next few weeks, we should start to get into those teardown phases where we can actually learn a little bit more about the progress that Tesla has made from a manufacturing point of view and an efficiency point of view. So a lot of exciting news here to come with Model Y, but I continue to believe that a lot of that is going to be just simply overshadowed by the macro environment. So one sort of piece of news related to that today was Morgan Stanley. They have reduced their price target on Tesla overnight from $500 to $480. They also lowered their annual forecast for deliveries from 500,000 to 452,000. Essentially based on demand concerns related to the macro environment. So I know Morgan Stanley is not necessarily our go-to in terms of thesis for Tesla. But that being said, I wouldn't be shocked if we see other analysts follow a similar path in terms of downgrades based on macro environment concerns. We know that the analyst community as a whole likes to be conservative and likes to have very solid rationale behind their forecasts that they can easily explain and defend. So it's going to be difficult for them to maintain some of the more bullish forecasts, I think, in the face of these macro headwinds. I think that's another red flag to keep an eye on over the next, couple of weeks before deliveries and before earnings. People might wait to see those numbers. That would be probably what I would do in that situation, but that doesn't seem to be the case historically from what we've seen from analysts. So we saw it from Morgan Stanley yesterday. I would definitely keep an eye out for that from others. The other piece of Tesla news, and I think this is kind of the last thing on my list, then I just have one other comment. The United Kingdom, so they have decided to remove their excise duty tax on zero-emission vehicles that are priced over 40,000 British pounds. So that excise duty tax basically depends on the emissions level of the vehicle for how much tax is applied. So we can't just say like, oh, this saves, X amount of dollars for Tesla in terms of the purchase, but those can be up to a few thousand, couple thousand pounds over the course of a few years of ownership. So another significant savings in terms of total cost of ownership there for Tesla vehicles in the UK, in addition to sort of the benefit in kind tax benefits that we've talked about previously there for the UK. So a bit of good news there. Again, exciting news for Model Y. In terms of the schedule for tomorrow, I do have a little bit of a different schedule. So I'm going to be doing a video only episode tomorrow. I'm sorry for the audio only listeners, but Matt Joyce, a friend of mine that has been on the podcast many times, he just had his Hardware 3 retrofitted into his Model 3. So he was actually kind enough to shoot a little bit of a video for us, sort of going through that process. So I wanted to post that tomorrow for people that are going to be in that situation soon, or people that are just curious about it. So be on the lookout for that on YouTube tomorrow. I'll put a link on Twitter, and should be easily accessible there. I'll probably add it back into the show notes for this episode if you're behind today. So be on the lookout for that. And otherwise, if you're only an audio listener, I will see you again on Monday for, I believe, the March 17th episode of Tesla Daily. But that is it for today. Thanks for listening.